Today, we're diving into something that's totally changing the game in the fight against cancer. We're talking about how we're learning to read its genetic code and how that's shifting the battle from a one-size-fits-all approach to something way more personal.
You know, it's a question that has puzzled doctors and, of course, patients for ages. You can have two people both diagnosed with the exact same type of cancer, they get the exact same treatment, and yet one person goes into remission for the long haul while the other gets no benefit whatsoever. So what's going on? Well, it turns out the answer is actually written in our genes. For the longest time, the way we developed cancer treatments was through these massive clinical trials. And the results? They were always reported as averages. Now, that sounds all scientific and good, but it hides a really critical truth. There is no average cancer patient. That average number completely masks the people who had an incredible response and those who had no response at all.
So if that whole average patient idea is the problem, what's the solution? Well, that's what we're going to get into right now. Why every single cancer is fundamentally unique.
And this right here is the key. Every tumor has its own unique genetic signature. You can think of it like a molecular personality. And that personality is what determines how aggressive the cancer is, how it's going to behave, and, this is the big one, how it's going to respond to any given treatment. No two are ever exactly alike.
Now, this idea of a molecular personality wasn't just some abstract theory. There was a breakthrough study that for the first time actually decoded one of these personalities. And honestly, it changed everything.
The cancer they looked at was called diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. It affects about 25,000 people in the US every year. And back then, the standard chemo only worked for about 40% of them. It was a total mystery why it was so hit or miss.
So what did they do? Well, a group at Stanford took this totally new approach. Instead of just looking at cancer cells under a microscope, they decided to look at their genetic activity. They took biopsies from tumors, they pulled out the RNA, which are like the messages being sent out by the genes, and then they fed all that data into a computer to sort the tumors based on these genetic patterns.
And when they mapped those genetic patterns to how the patients actually did, the result was, wow, it was stunningly clear. Patients who had one set of RNA patterns, they died, even with the chemo. But patients with the other set of patterns, they went into remission. They realized they weren't fighting one disease. They were fighting two completely different cancers that just happened to look the same under a microscope.
And that discovery with lymphoma, that was just the beginning. It completely blew the doors open and made scientists rethink everything they thought they knew about all kinds of other cancers.
So when that same group turned their attention to breast cancer, the results were even more shocking. What they found was that breast cancer isn't just one disease. Nope, based on its genetic personality, it is at least 5 different diseases.
I mean, think about that for a second. This was a huge paradigm shift. For decades, the medical field had been treating 5 fundamentally different diseases as if they were all the same thing. It finally started to make sense why some treatments worked miracles for some people and did absolutely nothing for others.
And this new way of thinking has led to some absolutely incredible success stories. For example, there's a specific type of leukemia that was found to have a really unique genetic marker. Once scientists spotted that, they realized it could be targeted with a very specific therapy, a derivative of vitamin A, of all things. And the result? The cure rate shot up to an amazing 90%.
But just as we were starting to feel like we were getting a handle on the enemy, we discovered a whole new layer of complexity, and it's a big one. Cancer, it isn't a stationary target. It changes. It evolves.
A really terrifying example of this is glioblastoma, a very aggressive type of brain cancer. What researchers found here was that unlike breast cancer, where a patient usually has one of the 5 types, a single glioblastoma tumor can actually have a mix of multiple distinct cancer types all growing at the same time.
Just look at this timeline from a single patient's journey. The first tumor they found had 16 unique mutations. After treatment, the cancer came back. But this new tumor, it had 25 times more new mutations that weren't there the first time. Then it came back again, this time with another 16 new mutations on top of all the others. The cancer was literally evolving to survive the treatments.
This led to a huge realization for doctors. The cancer they were treating the second or third time around was not the same one they treated initially. Its genetic personality had changed, which meant a treatment that worked once might be completely useless against the new evolved version that pops up later.
So this brings us to this incredibly difficult question, right? This is the next frontier for oncology. How do you possibly hit a target that is constantly moving, constantly rewriting its own genetic code to stay one step ahead of you?
Well, trying to answer that question has really launched us into a whole new era of cancer care.
It's an era defined by some incredible new tools, but also a whole lot of really tough new questions.
Okay, so one of the most game-changing tools we have now is something called a liquid biopsy. It's amazing. Doctors can take a simple blood sample and find these tiny fragments of DNA that are shed by the tumor. It's called ctDNA. This lets them track the cancer's genetic changes in near real time, without having to do an invasive surgical biopsy every time.
But all this new technology brings up some really big challenges. What should the new standard of care even be in a field that's changing this fast? What will insurance companies agree to cover? How on earth can doctors keep up with this flood of new research? And who's responsible for helping patients understand these incredibly complicated decisions? These are the huge questions the entire medical world is wrestling with right now.
So we've gone from treating the so-called average patient to facing a disease that has a unique, evolving personality inside every single person. We are finally, truly learning how to read cancer's deadly code. And the next chapter, the great challenge of our time, is figuring out how to use that knowledge to rewrite the ending, one patient at a time.